Hey everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back for the 193rd Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. You see the ocean behind me about to be churned up with yet another major hurricane. Milton now is about to hit Florida yet again. We have a really packed 2 hours and 20 minutes coming up here. The first hour is going to be with the great Andrea Miller to talk to us about grassroots organizing in the state of the campaign in terms of voter turnout. We hopefully will be joined by Ray McClendon. We're also going to get an eyewitness in-person account reporting from Asheville, North Carolina, where our good friend Eileen Proctor is there. And then we're going to also talk to a group called Field Team 6, which is doing voter turnout stuff that Andrea is well aware of. Andrea, of course, is our great guru on grassroots organizing for the 24 election. In the second hour, equally mind-boggling, we are going to have a webinar on nuclear power at Palisades, Michigan. This is the reactor on the west coast of Michigan that they want to. Yeah, the sheer idiocy staggers the mind. They want to restart the shut Palisades nuclear plant with a company that's never even operated a nuclear plant, Holtec in New Jersey, otherwise known as Cory Booker Incorporated. And we are going to be joined by at least three great experts. First will be JOE Mangano, who has been following the health impacts of nuclear power for decades. He's a truly remarkable and unique expert on this. And then we're going to be joined by Roger Rapoport and Kevin Camps, both of them from Western Michigan, who are total experts in what's happening at Palisades. And I will point out, I do have personal experience. In 1966, I was in Ann Arbor as a junior, and the Fermi nuclear plant near Detroit almost blew up. And it was actually the inspiration for the first ever rap song that was written by Gil Scott-Heron called "We Almost Lost Detroit." So there's a ton on that. The second hour is going to be a webinar on, and also we're going to be joined by Linda Seeley from Diablo Canyon, where there are major developments. A lot is going on. This is just like in the presidential election, we're at a turning point. We're also at a turning point with how we get our energy. And we are, inaugurating on these calls the campaign to totally solarize Los Angeles in time for the 28 Olympics. And we're going to continue to talk about that. So another full boat. And it's great to have you all with us. Andrea Miller, we're going to give you the gavel here. You are our queen of get out the vote organizing on the grassroots. And what is now happening with this insane election?
Oh, well, hey, Harvey, thank you so very, 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 very much. Um, 2024 is shaping up to be an election like no other. We are currently running get out the vote activities in Virginia, North Carolina, um, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, and Texas. So I just dropped a link in the chat to where our phone banks are. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to walk people through navigating our screen because there is just so much information there. Now, the system that we use, we have a training video. You do not need to use your phone, just like you are attending this Zoom meeting on your computer. This is also where you're going to make your phone calls. If you want to get some training with live instructors where you can answer questions, this is what Join a Phone Bank event is for. We do training on our phone bank every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So there are always going to be people willing to teach you how to use the phone banks And once you know how one operates, they all use the same technology, they all work the same way. Now, if you have a group and you want to host a phone bank where you get all your group members together and one of our team or a couple of our team members comes and does training for you, we are thrilled and happy to do that. All right, now, as I said, we are calling North Carolina. All of our states that have early voting are currently up and on the website. We call county by county because the locations, the registrar's phone number, those are all different county by county. And more counties are going to be added. Now, unlike a lot of people, we leave messages. We believe if somebody's got an answering machine and you don't leave a message, that's dumb. That's like knocking on a door and not leaving any literature. If you really want to talk to voters rather than leaving a lot of messages, call the rural counties. Voters in rural counties pick up the phone when it rings, whether they know the number or not, and they're happy to talk with you. What we are seeing is the party is concentrating even on Black voters in the big urban areas. The rural areas, not so much. So call rural. Virginia phone banks are up. Now, we started voting in Virginia on September 20th, and nearly 400,000 Virginians have already voted. What's interesting about this election in Virginia is normally Republicans are anti-early voting. They consider that part of the steal. However, in Virginia, our darling governor has put a padlock, username and password, on his Secure Your Vote Virginia site. And we are noticing that in a number of congressional districts, more Republicans have early voted than Democrats. So it's going to be a very, very, very interesting election. Normally in Virginia, early voting, it is 80% Dem, 20% Republican. We've got some counties where we are running 60-40 R to D. So it's going to be interesting people. Georgia, we are doing GOTV calls to Georgia. Now, if you are my age, please leave the make calls to Gwinnett County young voters alone and make calls to the other counties. This is designed for our 18 to 30-year-olds to call other 18 to 30-year-olds. Now, Hurricane Helene impacted Florida. Hurricane Milton is on the way, and Milton is probably going to impact both the west side of Florida. It's going all the way across the state, and it's going to impact the east side too. In 2022, the conservatives invested in community centers in Florida. Didn't work that well on Black women, but it did have an impact on Black men. So in Florida, we are only calling Black women. Florida is a very interesting state. Number one, it's got 40 electoral votes. Number two, abortion is on the ballot in Florida. Number three, legal marijuana is on the ballot in Florida. So theoretically, Florida has two get out the vote drivers that normally they don't have. In Texas, Early voting starts on October 21st. And again, because of the investment in community centers in Texas, we are only calling the women in Texas. So our phone banks basically tell people we're calling, we're not asking them for money, we're giving them voting information. And so we let them know when early voting is, and then we ask them, do they have a voting plan? Are they voting early? Are they voting by mail? Oh, that makes our heart sink. Or are they voting on election day? One of the other voter suppression tactics in this election is North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama have absolutely huge ballots where there are more than 20 offices on the ballot that people are going to have to vote for. We really want people to vote early and not wait and show up on election day and then be shocked that there are 20 or more than 30 people that they're supposed to vote for. So that's a real quick lay of the land. Georgia starts early voting on October 15th. North Carolina starts early voting on October 17th. Florida and Texas start early voting, and South Carolina on October 21st. Now, the counties that we are calling in North Carolina are outside Helene's impact zone. We are calling counties to the east of Interstate 85. As I said, Florida, Milton is going to cross the entire state of Florida. It will be there by Thursday. We will probably have an idea of what Florida looks like late Thursday, early Friday morning. So that is my basic information. And Mila, you've got a question. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. I'm just wondering, since today is the last day to register to vote in Texas, whether you will be calling any women in Texas in that demographic that you targeted to make sure that they're registered to vote.
We don't do voter registration. Every voter that we call is already a registered voter. We only do get out the vote for people where if they held the election tomorrow, they're already registered to vote in it.
Okay.
So yes, we have a very, very clean list. Another interesting thing to note, Vote Builder, NGP Van, Every Action, whatever you want to call the thing, is no longer an American-owned product, which is why we do not get our data from it. Currently, it is owned by a group of Saudi investors. In 2023, we did a test of address data that we got from Vote Builder, NGP Van, the tool that the party uses, versus PDI, the system that the party uses in California and that we have used since 2020. Our wrong address rate was 2%. The other product was 23%, and that was back in 2022. In 2023, they fired 40,000 of their data engineers. So again, we do not use that product. Okay, Stephen SPITZ has got a question.
Yeah,
Stephen.
Stephen's
Hey,
my
Andrea.
fellow U of M grad, and then we're going to go to Ray McClendon. The great Ray McClendon has joined us from Georgia. Go ahead, Steve, and then we'll go to Ray.
Yeah, Andrea, I was wondering whether or not you're going to be doing texting this cycle.
Yes, we are definitely doing texting, although our texting costs have doubled. The telcos that actually process and move the text around have doubled their rates. So our vendor came back and let us know that they have raised their rates. But yes, we are already texting Virginia. We have just started texting Georgia, and North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, and Texas. Providing we get extra money to pay for it, will be going up. And one of the other things I did not mention is we are putting up a mutual aid program to help our folks in North Carolina, Florida, and Georgia who were impacted by Helene. So in the event we call a voter and that voter has needs, we will be able to move that into our mutual aid system and then notify the appropriate people. That was my business from 2006 to 2019.
Well, listen, Ray is about to join us, Andrea. If you and Ray can conspire, put a note in the chat that everybody on the call can send to their lists. Because I've got friends I have a couple of friends who want to go to Columbus, Ohio to work for Kamala Harris, and they discovered there was no campaign in Columbus, Ohio to work for Kamala Harris. And there is one for Sherrod Brown, thankfully. But at any rate, if you and Ray can give us exactly a paragraph, a joint paragraph on what that everybody on the call can then resend to their groups, their lists, that would be great. Okay? I see a stunning silence here.
I'm not following you, dude.
If you can just give us a paragraph that everybody can reproduce and send to their lists of where people can go to hook up with Andrea and with you, Ray, to do this work.
Oh, okay.
Sluggo, if I remember from last week, Ray really needs money
Okay.
to do what he's doing. And rather than spending money to have people fly around and
No, they're not going to fly. This is for people to make phone calls and sign postcards.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay.
Okay, can we do that, Andrea and Ray? And then, my buddies who are one's in Boston, one's in Portland, can get on the phone and signing postcards. They're ready to do it.
The postcard campaign, though, is over now.
Okay, all right then. So whatever phone call, these aren't people who are going to fly to Georgia. These are people who are prepared to work the phones. So if you can give us the contact that everybody on the phone call on the Zoom call can reproduce to their lists, we're going to reach a ton of people. Okay, Andrea, go ahead, and then Ray.
Oh yeah, I am dropping our phone banking list link in the chat again. Everything phone banks is right here. And again, we are calling the counties that Ray and Richard Rose suggested. More counties will be going up. So as we finish one county, a new county goes up. So the Georgia rural counties will start going up.
I'm sure we have tons of people on this call, and those people on this call have tons of friends who are ready to make phone calls wherever needed. And you got those of you who never phone called. Andrea, do you have I did phone calling for the Pacifica election last week. I called 20 people and I got 3, but I did leave 17 messages. Is there an average of people that pick up when you call?
Well, it depends. When you're calling urban areas, people who screen their calls, you are maybe going to get 2-3% people are going to pick up, which is why we leave messages. We do know that people listen to the messages because people call us back. Our phone banks, every state has a phone number that is associated with it. And that is the number that shows up on the caller ID. When we are doing phone bank trainings and we're calling Georgia, one of the trainers has that phone number forwarded to their phone. So if a voter calls us back, we've got a trainer that is going to grab that call and answer their question.
Okay, very good. So if you'll put that link in the chat, Steve, if you want to show it at some point, that will be good. We want to direct people, and then Ray, we want to be able to direct potential donors to you. Ray, go ahead, please. Ray McClendon, and then Steve Caruso can jump in. Although, Steve, do you want to jump in very quickly? Is there a technical thing you need before Ray?
Yeah, technically, what is the caller ID when you make these calls? A lot of people get scared away by, you know, it's from some county or whatever precinct. But Andrea, do you have a caller ID? What is the caller ID that shows up when your folks call? Just curious.
Caller ID is a local phone number, but there is only one number per state. So since Atlanta is the biggest region in Georgia, people will see probably a 404 number. In Virginia, they see 804, which is Richmond. In North Carolina, they see 704.
Okay.
Point
So
is,
there
will
is
not see
one
your phone-
number
They will not see your phone
associated
number.
with each state.
They will not see your phone number.
Oh,
Right.
Okay.
Right.
yeah, that
You
would, I would,
don't use your phone. You call through a dialer that is connected to the
Right.
computer.
if somebody could set up the dialer so that there was some encouraging caller ID, maybe, you know, I don't know, might scare people away,
But no,
but it might
we
be.
don't do that.
Okay,
We don't
all right.
do that. It's one number per phone bank. That is what the technology allows.
All right.
That's
Thank you
what
for
we
that, Ray.
do.
Thank you for that, Andrea. And Ray, do you want to jump in now, please? And
No,
Yeah.
I just want to support what Andrea was saying. We just completed the postcarding campaign. It was an amazing campaign for Georgia. We've sent over in conjunction with our partnership with Andrea over 900,000 postcards into Georgia. We had a lot of different groups engaged in that, from Andrea's volunteers across the country to a lot of local civic engagement organizations in the state of Georgia. So that's been very effective. Now we've moved out of that since today, since early voting starts next Tuesday, a week from tomorrow. Then now we're going into the critical text banking, phone banking. And it's very easy to do. Any of you that have already worked with Andrea's team on that, it's very simple to set up, to get trained and be up and running in no time. So it's a very simple process. The next phase also, in addition to phone banking and text banking, we'll be working with Andrea on canvassing in targeted communities. We have we've worked with her PDI platform in the past. It's very user friendly, and it allows us, you know, in the old days we used to use the NGP van data, and it was bad data, as she mentioned. I think it was more than 23%, honestly, of bad information, bad phone numbers, bad addresses. There's so much change in a metro area like Atlanta, as an example, of how many different new apartment complexes have been built, how many old ones have been torn down. You need current data in order to be able to properly cut turfs for individuals to go out. And now we don't have to go through all of those kinds of machinations where people are literally out saying, hey, the place you want to go is no longer there. Or the place that was there now was a 40 apartment complex, now is a 240 unit apartment complex. So those are all the things that we'll be starting next weekend, using this data, going into canvassing in targeted communities. And the other good thing is we're targeting those high opportunity voters, which otherwise are called low propensity voters. Those voters, we know we got the super voters down pat. We're not worried about them as much. But we're worried about voters who have not voted in one or two of the most recent elections. So we want to get to them that are on the rolls but have not participated. And that's where we'll be targeting our canvassing starting next weekend.
Great. So if you and Andrea can each, put something in the chat, send me each a paragraph. I'll resend to the list that we're using for these calls, and we can get people connected with you. So people,
All right.
people who go to Andrea will do calling. People who go to Ray will be making donations.
We work in tandem. So you
Okay.
support
Well,
either one of us. We'll make that knowledge work.
Well, whatever the two of you come up with, I will resend to everybody on the call.
Okay.
And then they can resend to their lists, and we'll reach a goodly number of people. Okay,
Right.
that makes
Okay.
sense.
Sounds good.
Finerman, sorry to hear about your mom. I hope you can stick with us for a while. Is the guy from a fellow from Field Team 6 on the call? Raise your hand if you are. I did want to ask you guys, there's a lot of speculation about how the storms will affect the turnout in partisan terms. This is just, we are nonpartisan, but I'm curious what you think the impact will be in terms of who will win the election. Andrea and Ray, I mean.
I think it's going to be neutral. I mean, as an example, you hear most about what's going on in North Carolina, in Western North Carolina, but Eastern Georgia was hit very bad as well. We are actually doing some of the mutual aid that Andrea alluded to in several counties east of Atlanta, south and east of Atlanta, which have substantial urban and minority populations. So although in North Carolina, it might be more conservative voters that were disproportionately impacted, it's different in Georgia. So I can't say that it's net going to be a negative or a positive either way.
Andrea, what do you think?
Again, I agree with Ray. Did we lose election infrastructures in terms of early voting locations? All of our targets in North Carolina are away from the destruction. So again, that question is, what did we lose in Augusta, Valdosta, Savannah? Are they going to make sure that there are functional early voting locations in the Black neighborhoods? Those were the areas that were more impacted than the other side. That is still a question.
Okay.
And we just don't know.
No, and we're not going to know. I do believe that I saw one Trumper who compared the administration's response to the storm with Bush's response to Katrina. And I don't think in any way, shape, or form that's even close. The Biden Harris administration seems to have done in a nonpartisan way a remarkable job of responding here. I'm not being in the area. Maybe you guys can comment, but I don't think that the political liabilities that Bush incurred at Katrina are going to be reflected on the Harris campaign in this situation. So I guess we'll see. Is Mr. Berlin on the call, please? Mr. Berlin from Field Team 6.
He is not yet.
Oh, okay. All right. We can continue with this. Steve Caruso, go ahead.
Yeah, apparently FEMA's running out of money, and that's not the administration's fault. It's just like the other things that the other party won't vote to. They're just pulling out all the stops and blocking any common good efforts for this country.
Okay. Yeah, that FEMA money has been blocked, is my understanding, but not by this administration. Thank you for that, Steve. Myra, did you have a hand?
Oh, I had heard that the administration can always sell treasury bonds in order to fund FEMA, but I really don't know. I'm not an expert on that.
Okay.
That's not correct.
No, that's wrong.
That's not true. No, no.
The problem right now is with the Congress and with the Speaker of the House. And that's what, again, Democrats are bad at messaging. They need to demand that the Republican-controlled House of Representatives do their job. You know, but budgets emerge out of the House. It's the House that must do this work first. Okay? And they've taken a 6-week break.
Yeah.
Refused to
And they
vote.
are not being called back for the emergency.
And they are not being called back. Exactly. So that is what needs to be dealt with. This is very frustrating to hear them putting out all of this disinformation when it's really the Republican Congress that has failed to act.
Does the who can call back Congress? Is it the president or the speaker?
The Speaker.
The Speaker.
The president does not have the power.
No.
The Speaker. No,
No,
the Speaker
he
can,
never
only
did.
the Speaker can convene the House.
Wow. That's mind-boggling.
And the other thing that they are doing when they come back is they are tying the appropriations to a yes vote on requiring proof of citizenship in order to vote. That would be changing federal law. That is why we do not have a budget. It is being held hostage so they can, at a federal level, suppress the vote.
And it's already
The
illegal.
money-
It's already illegal for non-naturalized citizens to vote. So I mean, they are again the same. We deal with this problem in Georgia all the time, where these Republicans create solutions where there is no problem.
Well, the party line, of course, is that the money is going to immigrants that should be going for the FEMA. That's the party line.
No. And they're,
Yeah, but that's patently false.
yes.
Well, that's never stopped. That's after watching the debate with the vice president. Clearly, that's no hurdle
Right,
to
yeah.
JD Vance. So,
Yes.
all right, Paul Newman, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add that what's even worse, and this needs to be told to all those Trump supporters, that if Trump gets in, Project 2025 will get rid of NOAA, which will report when hurricanes are coming, giving people advance notice, and they're going to destroy FEMA. You know, I mean, it's unbelievable.
Okay, well, anybody who's boiling blood right now, join the club. Ruth Strauss had a hand and she disappeared. And Dennis Bernstein, are you still with us? Dennis is the host of the Flashpoint show, and he probably would be a good one to connect with in terms of this. I think Dennis just disappeared on me. And Ruth Strauss, you had, oh no, Dennis, if you want to, I'm going to unmute you if you want to talk about what your show is going to do. Next week, by the way, we are going to devote some time to a
Can you let her go or no, you can't?
I am here, Harv.
Okay, go ahead. Dennis, are you?
I've got a wallet.
That you're going to put this on your show on KPFA?
I just have a question. That's all. And this is
Okay.
just a sincere, straight ahead question to Ray and Andrea. What is your honest assessment, and I know you're always honest, about the impact that Palestinians and Arab Americans are going to have on the election if the slaughter continues to expand and they're
None.
killing 50 or 100 people a day?
None. Absolutely none. We basically surveyed the Black voters in urban areas and in rural areas, and we allowed them to tell us what was important to them. We didn't suggest anything. We didn't take anything off the table. I was shocked. In most of our surveys, no one mentioned it. In some of our urban surveys, it was mentioned by a few people. It never made our top 5 list. And it normally did not even make the top 10 list. Black voters overall are looking at jobs, the economy, that's kind of all tied together, protecting public education, reproductive rights, and voting rights. Those were the big 5. People use slightly different words, but those ended up being the big 5. I was shocked. We don't tell people what's important to us or them. They tell us. We were frankly shocked.
Okay.
I agree. I totally agree with what Andrea said. We're just not picking that up in our conversations on any level.
Do you think it's because of the lack of real reporting on the impact of the slaughter and who's being hurt? Or is it just people don't care about what's going on outside the country?
I can't say why. I can just tell you what we've seen.
Next week, Dennis will be part of a discussion we're going to do on the Middle East. And Dennis, I hope you'll connect with Andrea and Ray. I'm sure there are plenty of people in your huge listening audience that may want to join in on phone calling for GOTV.
Thank
Dennis,
you.
Is there more you want to say, Dennis?
No, just thanks for the response. I'm looking forward to talking about it next week.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Mike Hirsch, Lynn Feinerman. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Dennis, for bringing this up, and I look forward to a deeper discussion next week. I can't help but believe that most people who are planning on voting, which is the universe we're talking about when it comes to the elections, see very clearly that if they care about Palestine, and now if they care about Lebanon, Iran, and whoever else Netanyahu is targeting, they all basically understand that Donald Trump would be much, much worse in all of these instances, and that the most sophisticated among us understand that Trump put a lot of this into motion. Now, I'm not excusing Biden not getting us back into the Iran deal. He could have done something to that extent, although it would have been hard to get it through the Senate again, which he would have had to do. He could have tried a little harder, or somewhat at all.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Dennis, you can respond.
But Dennis, let me finish, please. And I really do respect what you have to say.
Dennis. But let's not get into the weeds.
I just want to say really quickly, most voters who care about the Middle East know what a threat Trump is, and whether they're happy or not with Kamala Harris's approach so far, or whether they're, thinking it's half full or half empty, they understand that Trump would be a freaking disaster.
All right, thank you for that, Mike. Dennis, do you want to respond? And then we're going to move to Lynn Feinerman. Dennis, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't, everybody knows it's the lesser of two evils when it comes to the Middle East, because Harris has been strongly outspoken and hasn't really variated. But maybe I don't disagree that anything is better than Donald Trump. We have no problem there. But there's a lack of education and understanding about the nature, the level, and the history of the situation that deprives every voter in America an understanding in terms of what weight they want to give to that story. But thank you very much. We'll talk about it more next week.
Yes, thank you both. We appreciate that. Lynn Feinerman, go ahead, Lynn.
Yes, hi, greetings to everybody. I saw, I was concerned about a few things, particularly Michigan, and I wasn't sure. I don't think that your surveys, Andrea and Ray, encompass Michigan. I think you do
No.
Arizona, but not Michigan. But in any case, Dr. Nancy mentioned that it's been reported that Jill Stein is grasping about 30% of the vote in southern Michigan. So I am wondering if
Lynn, can I ask you right there? You said 30% of what vote?
Good question. I don't think it was clarified by Dr. Nancy. Maybe you want to clarify, Dr. Nancy, 30% of the vote in southeastern Michigan. I would presume
what
that's
demographic?
I would presume, yeah, I would presume that's Dearborn. And Dearborn has a very, very high Middle Eastern background demographic. So I'm concerned about that a lot because Rump has already appropriated software out of the election machinery in Michigan reportedly. So and that really is a critical state. So I'm just wondering what you all think of that.
Well, I can say from afar, since we don't work in Michigan, but knowing some folks that work in Michigan, the Black vote in Michigan, from what I understand, is strongly behind Vice President Harris. She is having challenges with the Arab community, and with the uncommitted vote, which is primarily these Middle Easterners. Some good news that came out today in Michigan is that 25 imams endorsed Kamala Harris. So she's making quiet inroads into those communities. I think she's being smart, honestly, by not allowing, she's got so many areas that she's got to introduce herself to the country, that I think she's very reluctant to let anyone potentially hijack her message to a single issue. And so a lot of what we want to hear on issues like this, the conversations are going on behind the scenes with her staff and those constituencies. So I would say we need to give her the latitude to know that she's very smart. She's got a strong staff, and they're working on this. And I think 25 imams coming out for her is a sign that is working.
Well, we do have to remember that Donald Trump is the first president in United States history to have specifically banned Muslims from coming into the United States. That should be a fairly clear message. I also don't want to, as a historian, in the overview here, and this is again nonpartisan, one of the bottom lines of this election that people don't lose track of from time to time is that this, after 5,000 years of human civilization being dominated by white men, this election would put a woman of color into the most powerful position in the world. It's a Darwinian moment here. So I would never underestimate the unspoken impact of that. Although the Republicans who are against Trump put out a piece with Sam Elliott, the guy who has the great mustache, and the final line was, "Be a man and vote for a woman." I thought, well, there's a historical moment, So everybody, go ahead and Google Sam Elliott and see if you can find that ad. It's really great.
Yeah, White Dudes for Harris has put out a lot of great ads. So has
Right.
Vote Vets, which is considered to be on the conservative side. So there's a lot of that going. There's
Right.
a lot of that going on that you have to pick up on social media in order to really figure out. And then this podcast by, I think her name is Alex Cooper. This was an extraordinary coup for Vice President over the weekend. She's got 5.5 million subscribers on her podcast.
Wow.
And from all across the political spectrum.
It's not Alice Cooper. You're not
No.
talking about Alice Cooper. Okay.
No.
Okay. Just want to make sure we got a medium.
I think it's called Call Me Daddy. I mean, it's not for our demographic, Sluggo.
Okay. You mean old guys who follow the NFL?
She's doing strategic things that the mainstream media is not picking up, and that, quite frankly, the mainstream media is frustrated they can't force her to give them scoops and come through them in order to get her message out.
Real quick, Sluggo, if I could underscore what Ray just said. Alan Minsky, who's been on these Zooms, he's the executive director of PDA. While we were in Chicago, he met with the Harris Walz campaign to plead to them to pay more attention to some of these issues that we've been talking about. And no, as Ray said, she's not going to call a press conference. She's not going to do this publicly, but quietly behind the scenes, she is listening to people, and it is already causing, like the imam stepping up and endorsing her. That's huge. Also, I work with the Uncommitted campaign here in Maryland. It's a national campaign that we had during the primaries to try to push then candidate Biden around on demanding a ceasefire in the Middle East. And the Uncommitted campaign nationally, while they have not endorsed anybody, they have called for people to vote in a way that would defeat Trump. So they're kind of threading a needle there. But she is doing the things, Kamala Harris is doing the things that she needs to do to shore up support among those of us whose hearts cry out for peace and hate to see the suffering that's going on. And while a lot of people will continue to demand more and to demand that she kind of, light herself on fire in front of the White House or something like some brave protesters do, she can't do that. She's not going to do that, but she's doing all that she can.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mike. Ruth Strauss has had a hand coming from this important demographic in Alabama. Ruth, did you have something to say?
Yeah, thank you. I am thinking that the people who are quote unquote, backing Jill Stein are actually disaffected whites. I'm not really, thinking that it's necessarily the Muslim community, but that's just an off statement. Either on this one or PDA, there was somebody who said that there were actually people in Michigan who were willing to house people who wanted to go door to door and solicit people to make sure they were going to vote and that kind of thing. So if anybody knows about that, I would be happy to spread the word, and all of us should spread the word. And Andrea, I see, is shaking her head, so maybe you know something about that.
No, I don't. I know the people in North Carolina that are willing to host. Maybe when Field Team 6 gets here, that is the kind of thing frequently that they do. They've got a lot.
You're right. That may be it.
Yeah, okay. Field Team 6. And okay, Dennis is here.
Perfect.
What's that?
Dennis Bernstein is here.
I'm here.
Dennis, did you have another hand, Dennis?
I just caution the folks who think that the Arab and Palestinian community is going to do the least of the two evils. I'm very connected with the community across the country, and I can tell you, the Democratic activists need to pay a great deal of attention to this community, because you will lose their votes. There is anguish from one end of this country to another about what's
Yeah,
going
we are, Dennis. I was
Yeah, but I
explaining
heard
that we
three
are.
comments
Okay,
about how
okay,
we-
okay.
The campaign is as well, even more importantly. So yeah, we can keep going around and around, but
Yeah, I'm
Ray
not
Okay.
said,
going around and around. I agreed to talk about it next week, but don't have a conversation about it after we agree
Okay.
to talk about it next week.
Yeah.
Thank you.
fair
Thank
enough.
you, Dennis. Okay. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Mike. Steve Spitz, go ahead. I will point out, since we're talking about Michigan, that the webinar we're going to do in the next hour, Field Team 6 does not seem to have shown up. If I'm missing you, say hello here. No? Okay. And Steven Spitz, did you want to say something?
Yes, I can
Bruce,
address
you
the
got to
question
mute.
about,
Go ahead.
are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I can answer the question with respect to Michigan. Yes, Alan Brill, who is in Oak Park, Michigan, is actually running a program called Michigan Summer, and he's sending people. They have identified numerous people who are willing to put people up. I, in fact, did that between two reunions in Ann Arbor. I stayed at a labor guy who also teaches at the University of Michigan, and Alan Brill is the person to contact for that. I had two reunions in Ann Arbor. Harvey, the second one was the Michigan Daily reunion.
Yeah.
And in between the two reunions, I did what I could in terms of voter registration in Ann Arbor. And there are good things and bad things that are going on in Ann Arbor. One of the good things is they have two on-campus city clerk satellite offices, one on Central Campus and one on North Campus. The one on North Campus is not open until October 26th, but the one on Central Campus is in the Art Museum, is supposed to be open now, Monday through Friday, 12 p.m. to 6 p.m.
And what is this
where
for? Is this for voter registration?
For everything, for
Okay.
voter registration, for voting, for getting absentee ballots. It's a full service satellite office of the city clerk's office.
How
the
common
bad
is
thing-
that? Ray and Andrea, sorry to interrupt, Steve, but are there cities that are doing what Ann Arbor is doing and providing easy to register facilities? Is this or
Not
is this
easy, not easy
Not
to
in the
register.
South, they're not.
But there are some locations that have voting precincts on or near campus. As an
Okay.
example,
Okay,
there's one contiguous to Morehouse College on the Atlanta University Center campus in Atlanta. There is a location at Georgia State University, which is in downtown Atlanta and has almost 50,000 students, and graduates more Black students than any other school in the state.
Well, Steve, are you
Harvey?
good?
Can I continue?
Yeah, go
You
ahead. But
interrupted me.
we're almost out of time, so go ahead, please.
Okay. So that's the good news. The bad news is they're doing a lousy job of communicating with students that they exist. They did not and have not produced anything that describes what's going on in these places. In fact, they also had signs before the date it was supposed to open on the 24th, which said we are open, yet they weren't open. Also, a number of students that I talked to had no idea that this place exists. The city clerk who was there briefly on National Voter Registration Day on September 17th, she said, everybody knows about this. We were here in 2020 and 2022. I said, well, no, the students in South Quad, where I lived 60 years ago, I talked to them. They had no idea. They just arrived on campus 3 weeks ago. You got to get the record out there, the information. Furthermore, the voter registration, there is a table there organized by students in Mason Hall. However, these kids are just sitting passively at the table. And they're
Okay.
not approaching students to ask them if registered to vote in Ann Arbor. A great number of students that I talk to have no idea that they're eligible to vote from their dorm. So
Stephen,
it's a really
Okay,
serious
okay.
when you told,
problem.
Stephen,
Mike,
you know,
okay, let him go. Okay.
yeah,
Thank
Stephen,
you.
we can't do anything about that, but did you get any answers from the people that you talked to right on the ground there?
Well,
Okay.
I'm working on it, but
Yeah, we can't
there's
do
still
anything
a
about that
problem.
though.
Okay. All right.
Well, that's not true, Mike. Don't say that you can't do anything about it. I mean, I just got off the phone with Jan Bendor, Harvey. You know
Okay.
her. She lives right near Ann Arbor, and she's working on this as well as others. So
Okay.
it's not that there's nothing that can be done.
Okay.
I didn't say
Well, listen,
nothing can
thanks for
be
the heads
done.
up
I
on
just
that.
said, yeah, I said we can't do anything about it right
Thanks
now.
for the heads up on
thanks,
that. And
Stephen.
Steve, it's a good report. We appreciate that. And we hope that the other campuses around the country will take the follow up on what you've said here. And I'm sorry to hear from Andrea and Ray that there's no parallel effort going on other campuses in their areas. One thing that I'm interested in, and Steve, if you have anything else, jump in. One thing I'm interested in, I saw a report, since we're all following the polls, and they seem to be, it's an interesting phenomenon, and they seem to be showing an election that's too close to call. There was a piece that claimed that the polls are definitely skewed towards Trump because the Gen Zers who are going to vote 60, 70, 80% for the Democrats are not surveyed in these polls. Andrea or Ray, do you have anything?
Nor are many Black people surveyed in these polls either.
So you believe that the polls may show the Republicans stronger than they actually are?
We need to get out of the poll, attitude and mindset. The polls have become over the last several years a mechanism for influence as opposed to a snapshot of sentiment. All right.
Yeah, very well said. That's a really good
Okay. And even more egregious is the fact that now you have these poll engineers that are engineering polls in order to skew the averages in Republican direction.
Wow.
A whole bunch of Republican polls dropped last week. Why? Because you've seen more of the polls skewing toward Harris. So they came out with an overwhelming number of Republican skewed polls in order to drag those averages back down to make the race look like a toss-up. Now, we're running like she's running like she's the underdog, and we agree with that strategy. But these polls that are showing that, Trump's got a lead in most of the battleground states, or he's picking up momentum, I don't trust at all. I think this is just more of the election denialism that has seeped into the right-wing polling apparatus so that they can have further justification that the election has been stolen when we win in November.
Very interesting. All right, that's really worth taking into account. Andrea, I saw you waving. You may have to go, I don't know, but thank you so much for joining in. Did you want to say something, Andrea?
Oh, I just put a little note in there. Remember earlier when it was Joe Biden, Trump was always claiming that he had the Black vote. No, he doesn't, never did. It is setting up an excuse and a scenario when he loses badly to claim it was stolen because everybody knows that Black people were going to vote for Trump.
Right.
So we have to stop falling for the okie doke.
Okay. And then I want to know what happens with the uncommitted vote when Trump is actually committed. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Anyway, that day seems to be fast approaching. We have 48 people with us. Tatanka, go ahead, and then we're going to switch over to the nuclear issue.
Just very quickly, I want to agree with Ray and Andrea. I will look for this guy who studied every vote since American history and found 10 pillars that if the candidate by before October got to above 5 has won every single election. And so he's predicted the last 30 years election. He said when Biden was still in the race, it looked like it was edging toward Trump. But once Kamala got started, two of the factors went. One of them that you don't even look at is polling. Okay. It's irrelevant. It's as Ray was just talking about. So I will find that guy's name. Maybe we can.
It's Alan Lichtman. Alan Lichtman.
Lichtman. Alan
Lichtman, whatever.
Lichtman.
You say Lichtman, I say Lichtman. But it's Alan, Lightman.
So anyway, he made his prediction.
Yeah, I saw it. It was very
interesting. So all I'm saying is that I'm agreeing with them on let's not get caught in the polls. And just to say one thing about Elon Musk, who is such a huge liar on Trump's campaign, he's saying things like, he's basically expropriating the whole Democratic thing, that the only way to save the Constitution is for Trump. If Harris gets elected, that's the last election you'll ever see. Along with, Harris isn't helping out with the storms. He is terrible. I mean, I knew he was bad, but even though I kind of am predisposed to like the car he made, I will never buy anything from him ever again. No. I mean, he's become a terrible liar.
It's become like the Jews after World War II who would never buy a Volkswagen.
Anyway,
and there are statistics actually that show that what Elon Musk has done politically has suppressed sales of Teslas. So there you go. But I'm not going to buy.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Tatanka. This has been a marvelous session. We do want you to come back, Andrea and Ray, whenever you think it's productive for you. And do send me that material so I can resend, and then everybody can send to their list. We have 50 people with us. Carl Grossman has joined, the great Carl Grossman, and which is a sure sign that we're going to be talking about nuclear power. So we do have in Michigan now, of all places, a major turning point, let's put it that way, of the question of the Palisades nuclear plant, and also when Joe Mangano. Oh, Joe's with us. Yes. But we have Roger Rapoport and Kevin Camps, as well as Joe Mangano to jump in on this. And we're going to have basically a webinar now on this idea of reopening nuclear plants. All of you, I'm sure, have read somewhere the nuclear industry jumping up and down, saying they're going to take these old nuclear plants and restart them. And Palisades is number one, and 3 Mile Island has joined the list. I do want to congratulate and compliment and thank Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda published a brilliant op-ed in the Philadelphia Inquirer about how she's been horrified with the discussion of reopening 3 Mile Island. And in that op-ed, and she said something in that op-ed that I have not seen in an op-ed in any other paper, which is that essentially that we're now suffering through hurricanes, which are being caused by the global heated waters in the ocean. She really made that connection in a way, a very, very clear way that I have not seen elsewhere. So I want to start with Roger, and then we'll go to Joe and Kevin. Roger and I were in Ann Arbor together in 1966 on October when the Fermi nuclear plant almost blew up. Oh, yes, Steve, very good job showing that Philadelphia Inquirer. Everybody should Google this op-ed. It's one of the best op-eds on nuclear power and one of the best op-eds on global warming. It's terrific. And Jane, God love her, has been a great supporter of Greenpeace, which I've been with since 1991. Really great, Jane, to thank you so much for putting that up. And I will say that after 3 Mile Island, actually since 3 Mile Island, the nuclear industry has been denying anybody was harmed. And I know for a fact that's not true. I was there in January 1980. It was the worst week of my life interviewing people. And so, Roger, if you'll give us the overview on Palisades and nukes in Michigan, Kevin, if you can jump in, and then Joe, if you will jump in and give us the health overlook, that would be terrific. So, Roger Rapoport, you're in Western Mass. You're a filmmaker, one of America's great investigative journalists. Tell us what's happening with Palisades.
Well, they had a victory lap for Palisades last week. Kevin's been talking about this from day one. They started out, it was going to be a $1.5 billion loan to restart this nuclear power plant that most people in the country had never heard of. Kevin correctly nailed it. It's actually $8.3 billion. We're now up to, they've announced now that the numbers suddenly risen to 4, and of course, more to come. Joe has been studying the larger problem for a much longer time, but letting no dust settle. In last week, there was a major press conference announcing this wonderful solution to climate change. Suddenly, despite the fact that nuclear power plants aren't being built anymore because they're too expensive and they take 15 years to start, a company called Holtec, which has never, ever operated a nuclear power plant or built one, is going ahead without any government licensing of any kind. And they're claiming they have implied consent to go ahead and restart Palisades, and they've begun all kinds of work on it. For example, they've done chemical cleaning of the primary coolant system. They're working on replacing the reactor head nozzles. They're doing fire safety modifications. They're doing control rod seal replacements and inspecting the steam generator and reactor vessel before the inspectors have even arrived on the scene, before they have government consent to do this. And of course, they're already finding out that there are many, many problems. It's interesting that when Palisades closed 2 years ago, not a single nuclear operator or utility, including the company that built the plant, Consumers Energy, formerly Consumers Power, stepped up to operate it. And in fact, Consumers Power wants nothing to do with this restart. They're refusing to buy any of the power that might be produced by it. And they're basically proceeding as rapidly as they can before any government agency gives them the required consent. It's sort of like building a house without permission. Now, there's a backstory to this. Some of you may know that the eminent domain process was used to take this plant, and right next door is a community called Palisades Park. And we're fortunate to have Joe with us today. Joe is going to tell us just a little bit about the Radiation Public Health Project and what they found out 50 years after Palisades opened, and what the results have been in the local community.
Well, I want to go. Kevin, if you want to jump in, and then we'll go to.
No, let Joe. Kevin's a great expert, but and I welcome him. But let Joe tell the cancer story, because I think this will help introduce Kevin's larger point.
All right. Kevin, you good with that?
Is that okay, Kevin?
I will note that Kevin is wearing a Detroit Tigers hat, who are in
right. Good for you.
In the
but I want
playoffs.
Joe to talk about
time.
what the cancer rate was in Van Buren County before this plant opened and what happened after it opened. This
Well, let me
speaks
just
exactly what
introduce
Jane
Joe.
Fonda and you just referred to exactly about
Right. Let me-
clean nuclear energy that's going to solve the climate crisis. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I want to introduce Joe. Joe is one of the world's leading experts on
Right.
radiation and health. He has been tracking the health impacts of atomic power reactors for what, 50 years, Joe? And
35, but you're close enough.
close enough. And you have also studied 3 Mile Island, where our book, Killing Our Own, made the first assertion that people had been killed by radiation at 3 Mile Island, which still infuriates the industry, but you, among others, have proven that's true. Now you've studied, and by the way, Palisades, for those of you who don't know, is on the west coast of Michigan. Now, how far from the Indiana border? It's on Lake Michigan, towards the bottom there. But you have made a profession of studying the radiation impacts on small communities near nuclear plants. And your work is absolutely impeccable and irreplaceable. And now you've studied, as Roger has said, the community around Palisades. Tell us what you found.
Well, thanks, Harvey. It's really unfortunate that I and the group Radiation and Public Health Project have to do studies like these, because it's something that health departments should do. It's something that should have been written into the regulations at the beginning of the nuclear era, but it wasn't. There is no health standard that reactor operators have to meet. In fact, there has been only one study by the federal government of cancer near nuclear reactors. That was done in the late 1980s. It was done only at the insistence of Senator Kennedy, Ted Kennedy. And of course, it is now obsolete. The data are more than 40 years old. So what our group has done is tried our best to fill in the blanks. And in the case of Palisades, what I did was to take and do an analysis of the trends in cancer deaths in Van Buren County, where the reactor is located, and which was the subject of the National Cancer Institute study in the late 1980s. Here's what I found. In the years just before and just after the reactor opened, the Van Buren cancer rate was 8% below the US rate. However, in the last 2 decades, that has changed. It's no longer below. The county rate is now 14% above the United States rate. So the county has shifted from a low cancer county to a high cancer county. Furthermore, the cancer death rate among people under 35 years old, these are children, adolescents, and young adults who are more susceptible to a dose of radiation than middle-aged adults. Their death rate went from 35% below the US in the early years, around startup, to 50% above the US rate. That is quite telling right there. Those are red flags which should be at least part of the discussion on the future of the Palisades nuclear plant. I mean, it's bad enough that restart would mean a chance of a core meltdown again. It's bad enough that more high-level radioactive waste would be produced, but in a county where the cancer rate is growing, that is unfortunate. The other study that was done actually was the idea of Bruce Davis. Bruce is a dentist who lives in the area, actually in a place called Palisades Park, which is really under 1 mile from the reactor. And Bruce spent his summer developing a survey and conducting a survey among residents of Palisades Park, many of whom are there only for the summer, some of whom are there all year round. And he came up with 117 responses out of 203, which is quite a good response rate. And what he found was that 10 people who have lived there for a long time, either as a summer visitor or year-round, have developed thyroid cancer. In a population that size, we would expect a little under 2 cases of thyroid cancer for a lifetime. So 10 cases with 2 expected means the rate is 5 times higher. It has not been published yet, but we are going to try to get the information circulated among people. Thyroid cancer, of course, is well known to be linked to radiation. In fact, there are very few known causes of thyroid cancer. but one is exposure to radiation, specifically radioactive iodine.
Wow. Now, have you had similar findings, or are you aware of similar findings around other atomic reactors? After 3 Mile Island, two women, Mary Osborne and Jane Lee, surveyed 500 houses in a community called Lower Swatara. And they went door to door, personally went door to door, and had an enormous cancer rate. And this was probably one of the most convincing early studies at 3 Mile Island that indicated the reactor had harmed people there. Are there other communities that you've surveyed that have similar findings to what you found around Palisades?
Yes, we published 40 articles in peer-reviewed medical journals. Among them were two studies that specifically addressed thyroid cancer. One, published in 2009, showed that if you took a 90-mile radius, which included eastern Pennsylvania, central New Jersey, and southern New York, that area had easily the highest rate of thyroid cancer in the United States in the early 2000s. And it just so happens that at the time, 16, well, still there are 16 reactors in that 90-mile radius, making it probably the most thickly the concentration of reactors in the U.S. And three of them were closed at the time, and well, now a fourth, with 3 Mile Island one being closed. Another study that was done was in 2017. We specifically looked at the 4 counties that flank the Indian Point nuclear plant, which is 35 miles north of Manhattan. And we found that in the late 70s, just as the 2 large reactors at Indian Point opened, the thyroid cancer rate was 22% below the state rate. And within 30 years, it had shifted to 51% above, which is a highly significant switch in these 4 counties, which have a large population of 1.7 million. So there are other studies of thyroid cancer, but these are probably the ones that are most that took the clearest look at shifts in thyroid cancer. I'll even cite the National Cancer Institute study, even though they sort of ignored it in 1990. They looked at areas near 4 nuclear plants in Connecticut and Iowa that had, because those 2 states had cancer registries at the time. And they took a look at the periods before and after the plant opened. And they found that before the 4 plants opened, the thyroid cancer rate was 23% below a particular state. And after, it was 1% below. That nice low rate had been wiped out. So, and 250 cases were included in the post-reactor startup period. So, there is evidence out there in the medical literature for people who say that it hasn't been studied. Well, that's not the case. Of course, there's always more that could be done, but
right. And this is something that the nuclear industry hates to hear. I'll tell you a quick story. In 1982, when Killing Our Own came out, which was the first full-scale investigation of the impacts of atomic radiation in various locations around the country, we asserted that people had died at 3 Mile Island. And we had studies backing this up. And I was on the Today Show with Bryant Gumbel, and I made that, I just said, matter of factly, he had no idea the impact of what I was saying, but I just said that 3 Mile Island killed people. And the nuclear industry went completely nuts, and they sent a 2-page telegram to the president of NBC News demanding that I be rebutted. And so they brought back on a guy from the industry, and we had an argument on camera with Mike Wallace. And at the end of the interview, the guy picked up a copy of Killing Our Own, which is a pretty substantial book, and threw it at me. So thankfully he missed, but nonetheless, this is serious, serious stuff. Now, Roger has told me, Joe, that the state of Michigan or somebody is finally taking your findings seriously and looking into this because they can't handle this. As in the movie, you can't handle the truth. They are fine. Are you being taken more seriously now?
Well, maybe it's Bruce Davis, because tomorrow morning Bruce and I are having a discussion with the state cancer epidemiologist of Michigan. And I have to tell you, in 35 years of doing this, I have never had any sort of an invitation. So Bruce
All
must know something that I don't.
Well, I will tell you that after 3 Mile Island, the state of Pennsylvania had been running a tumor registry. In other words, they surveyed from hospitals when tumors were reported. And after 3 Mile Island, they abolished the tumor registry. So there you go. I guess you could say that the Pennsylvania Tumor Registry was a casualty of 3 Mile Island. We've been joined by Linda Seeley from San Luis Obispo, and I'm wondering, have you ever done a study, Joe? Roger, I'm sorry, Carl Grossman is also on with us, the great nuclear journalist, and Connie Klein is with us from Cleveland. But has there been a study of the cancer rates in the San Luis Obispo area?
Joe?
No, there is not. The National Cancer Institute study in 1990 only included reactors that had opened by 1981. So Diablo Canyon was not a part of it.
You have to ask, and I know this sounds like a naive question, and we're going to go to Kevin Camps and then to Linda Seeley to keep going here. But you have to ask, how does any entity, a nation, an industry, put out 94 reactors, and there were over 100 at one point, and not study the surrounding area? How can you not study? And the industry's response is, well, we're not hurting anybody because there are no studies that show we're not hurting anybody, except for that kook JOE Mangano. But and then they fail to mention that they're not studying. How can you put out a product like that? Where is the product safety guarantee that should come with the nuclear power industry? I guess, Joe, you're it, right?
We have a monopoly, and the industry stands on the permissible limits equals not limits that are not harmful to health, which is
at
just
3 Mile
absolutely
Island. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Which has no basis whatsoever in
right. At 3 Mile Island, they claim, and they continue to claim, that not enough radiation escaped from 3 Mile Island to harm anybody. That's the industry line. But the bottom line is they don't know how much radiation escaped from 3 Mile Island. All the monitors, stack monitors, were off scale. The thermoluminescent dosimeter, in the northwest quadrant, in fact, showed high levels of radiation, and they said it was a defective monitor. And they don't know who was impacted, and they don't know how people were impacted. And then they continue to say that no one was harmed at 3 Mile.
I want to interrupt. Sherry McWhirter, who's been covering this story very extensively for MLive, is on the call today.
Oh, good.
She's asked a very specific question that I think both Kevin and I can answer. This is really important. And Kevin, I want you to join me on this. As you know, Holtec is going ahead. They have a license to decommission the plant, but they don't have permission to proceed on restarting the plant. This is very clear. And they know it. It's very clear. So what they've done is they've gone ahead and begun the process of restarting the plant, not loading the fuel, but just getting it ready for that process. And they've submitted an exemption request. And I'm, along with Alan Blinn, who was the nuclear design engineer at the plant for 6 years, have filed a petition arguing that this exemption is incredibly dangerous because there are so many unanswered questions, one of which came up this week when Holtec itself announced that there was a problem that Kevin's going to talk about with steam tube, plugging the steam tubes. Kevin, why don't you go ahead and give the breaking story about why this exemption request looks even worse now that Holtec has disclosed what you have been talking about for years.
Oh, sure. Hey, everybody, Kevin Camps with Beyond Nuclear, and I've been watchdogging Palisades since 1992. I'm from Kalamazoo, which is about 35, 40 miles downwind. And one of my first anti-nuclear power events I ever went to was Harvey Wasserman keynoting an event at Western Michigan University here, introduced by Michael Keegan, who's chairman of Don't Waste Michigan. So that was a pretty powerful event back in March of 1993. Well, first thing is, I don't know what question Sherry's asking, so if somebody can put it in the chat, that would help me to understand. But
well, it's about this petition to deny the exemption request.
Yeah, well,
Alan and I have filed with the NRC, and what's the basis of it? Basically, we're outlining a number of contentions that resumption of power at Palisades. These exemptions are not allowable, and it's a focus on the safety, regulatory, and procedural inadequacies of Holtec's proposals and actions, which have been highlighted by this disclosure this past week about the steam plugging the steam tubes.
Yeah, this restart from closed for good status is unprecedented in the United States and in fact in the world. The NRC has no regulations, which highlights the value of this petition that you just described. It might make sense to have a rule in place before the proceeding takes place. They're making it up as they go. It's ad hoc. 3 Mile Island Unit 1's already said, we're going to do the same thing and follow the same precedent that Palisades is setting. Dwayne Arnold in Iowa's waiting in the wings to do the same thing. We're calling it the zombie parade of zombie reactors. So in addition to the petition that Roger described, we have 5.5 hours left before the NRC's deadline. We have till 11:59 p.m. Eastern time to file an environmental coalition petition for a hearing and a request for a hearing and a petition to intervene against this restart. And we have a pretty powerful coalition put together: Beyond Nuclear, Don't Waste Michigan, Michigan Safe Energy Future, from Kalamazoo and from the Shoreline, as well as 3 Mile Island Alert, Eric Epstein in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, because they're next. And also Nuclear Energy Information Service, Jan Bodart's on the call. She's on the board. She's a board officer. Lake Michigan, last time I checked, is Chicago's drinking water supply, unless you want to switch over to Perrier at the grocery store. So we've got this coalition, and we too, like Roger and Alan Blind, are challenging this make it up as you go proceeding that we've been watchdogging, in fact, since March 20th of 2023 is when NRC and Holtec held their first public meeting about this regulatory pathway to restart. They've had a dozen such technical meetings since, if not more. At the same time as they're talking restart at Palisades, and we're watchdogging that, they're talking, at this point, because they keep changing their plan abruptly, they're talking 2 so-called small modular reactors of 300 megawatts electric each at Palisades. That would nearly double the nuclear megawattage at that site and create, you know, the chance of Fukushima-like domino effect meltdowns. And you've got both ends of the, both extremes of the safety spectrum, breakdown risks at the old reactor, break-in phase risks at the new reactor. Some kind of well-known break-in phase nuclear catastrophes would include Chernobyl Unit 4, was less than a year old. 3 Mile Island Unit 2 was less than a year old. So that's a lot of, you know, radioactive Russian roulette bullets.
Kevin, can you talk a little bit about the rapidly increasing tube failures? I know that Alan Blind dealt with this at Indian Point. There have been another reactor, San Onofre.
Well, let's
Indian Point, they gave up.
We've known about the tube.
Wait, before you jump in there, with tube failures, and I know that a lot of people here who aren't following the industry as close as we are, is that an aerial view of Palisades, Steve? Yeah, there you go. There's Palisades. on the Lake Michigan there. The tube failures refer there. Oh, there we are. Wow, that's great, Steve. Beautiful. Tube failures refer to steam generators. Now, all nuclear power plants have steam generators, which convert the heat and from the steam and then turn to turbines that generate electricity. Now, you'd think this would be a fairly simple technology, but in fact, because of radiation and the heat and the pressure, the metals on the tubes, there are many tubes in a steam generator tend to fail, and they sprout pinhole leaks, and they leak radioactive steam and water, and threaten the public and threaten the environment, and just flat out fail. And there's industry wide, we have seen failures at San Onofre, at Trojan, and at other reactors around the country, Maine Yankee, leading to the shutdown of the nuclear plants. Part of the reason is if you have to replace a steam generator, it's $500 million, and they don't work once you put them back in, as happened at San Onofre. So Kevin, who knows more about this than anybody else, really can tell us now the issue at Palisades is that Palisades is more than 40 years old. They've had the steam generator, and is that the steam generator with the steam going up in the air, Kevin?
Those are mechanical draft cooling towers.
Okay, so the steam generators are a very big deal. And Kevin, go ahead then, please.
We've known about the degradation of the tubes and the steam generators since spring of 2006, when Consumers Energy cited it as one of the reasons it was selling Palisades to Entergy, because they couldn't afford to fix them. Entergy owned Palisades from 2007 to 2022 and never fixed them because the NRC didn't require it. Now, Holtec gave some lip service in 2022 to perhaps replacing the steam generators. They did so in secret to the U.S. Department of Energy as part of their bailout application and restart strategy document, but they have since backpedaled. 3 months ago, they did an interview with Nuclear Intelligence Weekly, and their top spokesman for Palisades, Nick Culp, said, "Oh, we're not going to replace the steam generators. We looked at them and they're fine." And then, as Rogers indicated, a couple weeks ago, the NRC put out a preliminary notification of occurrence, which is rare. It's a red flag that there's something pretty serious going on at a nuke. This was about Palisades steam generator degradation. And then last week, the NRC put out a summary of a conference call with Holtec, because that preliminary notice didn't give numbers of tubes that were implicated. And it's a huge number. Our expert witness, Arnie Gunderson, has pointed out that just since Holtec took over, June 28th, 2022, they have 20 times the tube problems as Entergy did, and they own the plant for 15 years. So it's an indication that due to lack of active safety maintenance, like chemically preservative wet layup on the steam generators, Holtec has managed to accomplish accelerated corrosion of the steam generator tubes. And San Onofre 2 and 3 is a good example. The safety risks were so extreme with defective steam generators with tubes at risk of failure that the public pressure forced Southern California Edison to simply close the plant for good.
Kevin, it's very
He wasn't
important to
gonna do
note
it.
that Holtec has a fix for this. It's called sleeving. And this is the primary repair method. But in 2000, it was originally designed as a temporary fix lasting 1 or 2 operational cycles and only for a small number of tubes. So as Alan Blinn points out, sleeving was felt to introduce new failure points at the 2 cold rolled or welded pressure boundary points and increase stress on the existing tubes. As such, sleeving is discouraged as a long-term solution. So Holtec may propose a limited time, but there's no escaping that with 1,000 tubes in the picture, this represents something very important, which is they have never operated a nuclear power plant, they've never built one, and they never repaired these steam generator tubes. And I think this speaks to your point that you just made, is they don't know what they're doing, and that's why they want this exemption. And by the way, this is only one of a number of areas. This plant does not meet the safety standards that are required of all other nuclear power plants, including ones that have just gone online this year. Am I correct?
If you have a cascading failure of steam generator tubes, it's a pathway to meltdown. But like Roger just said, there are more than a half dozen major safety systems at the brink of breakdown at Palisades, and no plans to replace them. There's some speculation that maybe they will replace the steam generators, but they have a restart schedule of August or October or December of 2025, depending on which day you talk to them. Incredibly, the director of the Loan Programs Office at the U.S. Department of Energy, Yigar Shah, who just appeared at this Love Fest at Palisades earlier this week, was quoted in Bridge, Michigan saying, you know, this restart may take a couple years. That's an interesting thing to say when Holtec is saying it's going to start up next August. It may
There's
be
no way
that the steam generator tube problem is much more serious than Holtec is letting on. Holtec said in its secret bailout document to DOE in the middle of 2022 that it could replace the steam generators. It could fabricate the new ones itself up in New Jersey at a cost of $510 million. I think they wanted to stick the $510 million in their pocket as pure profit and skip the replacement. And now, because of what's been revealed, they may have to actually replace it. So they'll be paid the money, though. They're the ones making the new steam generators.
If they get this
8.2
exemption,
billion includes that 510 million.
if they get this exemption, or they can go ahead with this theory of implied consent, you know, basically they're claiming they have implied permission to go ahead and do all this construction work on a plant that they still don't have a permit for. That would be a pathway for restarting other nuclear reactors under the same approach, which is part of why we're filing this petition.
It's a scam. I did want to know, I went into a phone booth and changed my shirt. So Sherry McWhorter, and we're going to get to go to California and go to the Mothers for Peace to talk about Diablo Canyon for a minute. But Linda Seeley's with us. Sherry McWhorter, you're in Michigan. Did you want to ask any questions? I know you're with the media. Is there anything specific you wanted to ask Roger or Kevin about what's going on at Diablo, at the Palisades?
Sure. I'm interested in addition to what they've been talking about, if you would also speak to the rulemaking petition, because I think that's interesting, especially given the talk about 3 Mile Island and Dwayne Arnold.
Kevin or Roger, you want to address that? And then we'll go to Myla Reeson, who's got a hand, and then we'll go to Linda Seeley and San Luis Obispo.
Roger's petition, so he should speak to it.
Yeah, so basically what we're saying is that they're asking for an exemption, but there's no basis for it, because all the things that they want to exempt, as we're seeing with these tubes, obviously it's not clear that they're entitled to an exemption, particularly when this plant already doesn't meet number of standards. And also, Holtec has no experience doing any of this kind of work. So there's really no basis for it. What we're really saying is that, and the steam tubes are an example, is that in their attempt to get an exemption from the rulemaking process, they're proceeding without meeting the standards that apply to every other nuclear power plant. That would be the real basis of the petition.
Why should they? I mean, you know.
I was just going to. Harvey said that Palisades is more than 40 years old. It operated for 51 years, from 1971 to 2022. It was designed in the mid-1960s. Construction started in 1967. It is being grandfathered in. All of this is being grandfathered in. It's been stated by Michael Schneider, the lead author of the World Nuclear Industry Status Report. It's been stated by Arnie Gunderson. Palisades could never get an operating license in its current as-is condition. In 2024, they are trying to grandfather all these problems in. In 2024, some of these problems date back to 1972. The control rod drive mechanism seal failures, these are leaks of primary coolant, are worse at Palisades than at any other reactor in the United States. This has been going on since 1972. They've never determined the root cause. They've never implemented corrective actions. They do Band-Aid fixes that expose large numbers of workers to significant radiation doses over and over and over again. And that's how they're going to proceed into the future. So, like has been said, it's incredible that the NRC is doing acrobatics to accommodate Holtec. The safety risks are what concern us the most, but this taxpayer and ratepayer robbery that's going on at a grand scale should be of concern. We have a homelessness crisis in Kalamazoo. They are defunding teenage mental health in Michigan with 8.3 billion for restart and 7.4 billion for small modular reactors. Imagine the problems that could get solved in Michigan. No, we're going to give this money to a crooked company from New Jersey to put us all at risk. And I've got my Tigers hat on, and one of my lines is, whatever you care about in Michigan, Palisades could put an end to it. If you care about the Tigers, they may have to play someplace else. They're down with the Palisades.
Yeah, like the moon.
So Harvey, I want to respond directly to Sherry. She's asked about the petition. So basically, we're requesting that any interpretation of the existing regulatory framework used in the licensing action be formally approved by the NRC General Counsel to ensure that they're consistent with the NRC's mandate to protect public health and safety. This additional layer of review is necessary to mitigate concerns that the flexibility in implying the existing regulatory framework could undermine safety and security.
Okay.
We're also asking for transparency in the decision-making process, including public access to regulations and interpretations selected by the NRC staff. We want suspension of Holtec's action. We're specifically requesting that the NRC suspend Holtec's ongoing system restoration activities and license amendment reviews until the appropriate regulations are evaluated, approved, and aligned with NRC-approved design and quality assurance. And finally, Holtec is proceeding without clear NRC approval to disqualify NRC use of Holtec inspections for regulatory use and improving operations. According to publicly available documents, the NRC staff has not formally responded to Holtec's proposed regulations, which are the subject of this petition. And despite the absence of implicit approval, which Holtec is claiming, the company is proceeding with system restoration activities at Palisades site based on implicit approval because the NRC has not responded. In fact, there are inspectors on site, and this presents an immediate harm to the petitioners who filed requesting the NRC staff to take action to halt these activities.
Okay, Roger, thank you for that. That petition.
Sherry, that's what we're doing.
Sherry,
I'll send that to you. I mean,
Yes.
I'll send you a copy. Okay.
And Sherry,
by
is
the way,
there more
thank you for covering this story. We appreciate it.
Is there more you'd like from us, Sherry, or should we? No, I will point out that there was a restart of a reactor in Michigan in October 1966 when the Fermi 1 reactor almost took out Detroit. They sat for X number of years and then they reopened it. They spent $100 million reopening it, and then they had to shut it down. And that's the precedent we see in Michigan, along with the Midland plant sinking into the ground, but that's another story. We have Amila raised her hand, and we want to go to Diablo Canyon with Linda Seeley. Amila, did you want to ask something?
Yeah, thanks, Harvey. And I must correct you, Kevin. We refer to those reactors as silly, mythical reactors. So on this show, anyway. So
yes.
FYI, but I just wanted to go back for a second. I had looked to see if maybe Ray Lutz was still on the call. He's not, but in addition to him working in election integrity, he is also an engineer who testified brilliantly when Southern California Edison was attempting to restart the reactors at San Onofre. And he explained some of the problems there. SoCal Edison had commissioned Mitsubishi in Japan to build the steam generators, and they had never, that was a new enterprise for them. They had never built those generators before, and in order to have more tubes and make more money, they eliminated some of the stabilizing interior of the generators. And so those were new generators that failed and failed quickly. And so I just wanted to add that.
They actually leaked at San Onofre. And so the idea that anybody, and by the way, Roger, you misspoke. You called Holtec Helltech, which I think
Holtec,
is
yeah.
Yeah,
Holtec,
I think we should stick with that.
Holtec, yeah, right.
It's Helltech. So,
Right.
but the steam generator issue, for Sherry and others, has proven lethal. at other reactors, including Maine Yankee and San Onofre and Trojan as well. So when you're reporting, you may want to look into those other cases as well. And then here's the other big case, the Devil's Own reactor at Diablo Canyon. We have Linda Seeley, and Linda, you have a major event on Wednesday with the attempt to continue operations at Diablo Canyon, where, like Palisades, by the way, there's been no recent study of embrittlement. And the question of embrittlement actually was raised in reference to Palisades, Sherry, Roger, and Kevin. The water in Michigan at Palisades is significantly colder than it will be at Diablo Canyon. And if, God forbid, there's a meltdown and they pour in water that is sufficiently cold, the reactor pressure vessel will shatter. And this study made reference to Palisades because it is more susceptible to shattering because of the coldness of the water. We still have 42 people with us. You people have the greatest attention span of anybody in America, and I'm really thrilled that you're all with us. So, Linda, give us the latest news now from Diablo Canyon.
Well, something that's really interesting is that, like you just said, Harvey, where Diablo Canyon and Palisades have a lot, they're called sister plants, actually. They have a lot in common. They were both manufactured, the Unit 1 reactor at Diablo Canyon was manufactured in 1967, like the Palisades reactor. Number two, they have the same, what's called limiting weld material. It is the exact same material. I don't remember the number. It's like number 22407 weld. That those two welds have too much copper in them. Copper and what's the other one?
Nickel.
Nickel, right. So that it makes them, the temperature at which they shatter, a temperature that is higher than one would want it to be. Well, you don't want it to ever shatter, but to cause the reactor vessel to shatter. But they took the data from the Palisades reactor, from that particular weld, and substituted it because they haven't done a sample, or examined a sample of the weld material from Diablo Canyon that's exactly like that weld material. They haven't examined a sample of that for over 20 years. So rather than using a sample of the same material from Diablo, they just took it from Palisades and said, everything's hunky-dory at Diablo because it's hunky-dory at Palisades. Now, I would argue that it's not very hunky-dory at Palisades, and number one. And number two, tell me, even if it's identical material, identical in the composition of the material. One of those nuclear power plants is in Michigan, where it freezes and gets hot and humid and freezes and so on. The other one is in California, where it's salty air, very windy, never freezes. The conditions under which they operate are very different. And yet, the NRC allows them to use, it's like taking twins, and one twin is supposed to have a doctor's appointment, but the other twin decides to go to the doctor's appointment for the first twin because they're the same, right? There is absolutely no difference between the two. How could there be? They're twins. Well, that's how they're treating these two reactors. And I want to say to Kevin and Roger, whatever we can do, Mothers for Peace, with the information that we have on embrittlement from our embrittlement expert, we are more than happy to share it with you. And later on we can get together and talk about this, but it's an extraordinarily important point, there's the NRC, the longer I know the NRC, the more astounded I am at their reckless behavior. Their forgiveness of anything that the nuclear industry proposes. Their inability to regulate.
Yeah. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
It's
Now you have a local committee that's going to deal with embrittlement and another issue on Wednesday. What is this hearing coming up?
Diablo Canyon Independent Safety Committee, which is a unique committee at a nuclear power plant brought to life because of all the protests around Diablo. It's made up of three, quote, independent scientists who supposedly look at all the safety issues at Diablo Canyon, and they meet 3 times a year here, but they actually are so cozy. They're like the NRC. They're like an arm of the PR arm of PG&E, but we do get an opportunity to speak at their meetings. They're meeting here this coming Wednesday and Thursday, and they're going to address the topics of the embrittlement of the Unit 1 reactor vessel and the new seismic data that has been revealed about the incredibly underestimated seismic concerns that Mothers for Peace has. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
And
now unlike Palisades, unlike the earthquake issue has not been raised, I don't believe. Kevin or Roger, you can correct me at Palisades, but I will say we have Connie from Cleveland that the first reactor in the United States that was damaged by an earthquake was Perry, outside of Cleveland. It was shocking, and it's been hit again a second time, actually. But the parallels between Palisades and Diablo Canyon are extremely important. And I'm sure that Kevin and Roger will exchange information with you, Linda, because the work that's being done at Diablo is monumental. The Mothers for Peace have just been spectacular. And as she says, how the NRC continue to do what they do is beyond me. Connie, and then Steve Caruso, and then we're going to jump back. I'll give Joe Mangano another shot, and then Roger and Kevin, and we're going to be at the top of the hour. Go ahead, Connie Klein, please, in Cleveland. Did you want to say something?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Just real quick, thanks to everybody. I have one quick question for Linda. What, if anything, is the current status of the 2.206 petition that the NRC agreed to hear on the seismic issues? If you can just address that quickly.
We're still waiting for that. Well, we haven't gotten a final answer. And we don't even know if we'll get a final answer. They may just pretend it never happened. Who knows?
Unbelievable.
Mhm.
And of course, the earthquake issue at Diablo Canyon is paramount. Okay, Steve Caruso, then Kevin, you raised your hand, and go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I was showing clips of Paul Mobley doing radiation measurements around the existing Palisades. About 3 months ago, he did this. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard of him or if anybody else is doing any kind of surveys. He had apparently an interface with his cell phone where he can show where the path was and the hot spots and so forth, like stuff like that. And the fact that this radiation, I mean, you guys made it perfectly clear that this radiation is existent due to the fact of the numerous cancers around. And the same thing with Piketon in Ohio. Connie's familiar with this. All the plant workers or for the community trying to get compensation through the RECA. Connie, maybe you can say, I forget what that stands for, but people in the community were getting radioactive they just tried to auction a school down there near Piketon, and now the plant's getting back online. They're starting to refine the uranium and so forth. It's just
It's
the school.
mind-boggling.
Joe
It's mind-boggling.
Mangano worked on this that
Joe, did you
subject quite a
do
bit.
did you work on radiation rates around Piketon, Portsmouth?
I did. I'll just say, take a few seconds because I'd
Please,
be on
go
all
ahead.
night. But Pike County and the surrounding area have the highest mortality rates that I've ever come across in near any nuclear facility. The current premature death rate is more than double the U.S. So one of the highest in the country.
And of course, you've got Piketon, you've got the Portsmouth enrichment plant, you have, you know, just all these different facilities down in Southern Ohio. It's a nightmare. Kevin Camps?
I was just going to answer that question about earthquake risks at Palisades. Specifically, it's the old cask pad next to the lake that violates NRC earthquake safety regulations. And even the new one they built sometime later, further inland, violates NRC earthquake regulations. Not according to me, according to Dr. Ross Landsman, the top NRC dry cask storage inspector for the Midwest region, who called attention to it from the very start in February of 1994 and is still concerned about it. And I think Holtec agrees because they've talked about moving the old pad's casks further inland to the newer pad. But the problem is it's from the frying pan into the fire. The newer pad also is in violation of earthquake safety regulations. It's just a little bit further inland, a little bit higher ground, but not very far. So there's one example.
Well, the fault line that hit Perry is called the New Madrid Fault, MADRID, and it runs up the Mississippi River, and it's actually, to my knowledge, the most powerful, potentially powerful earthquake fault in North America. And it hit in 1986, the last place any of us expected an earthquake to hit a nuclear plant is Perry on Lake Erie. And it happened before it opened, thank God. Perry was just about to open. It got hit by an earthquake. The governor of Ohio at the time, Dick Celeste, took him to federal court to try and do at least an evacuation study before they opened Perry. And the federal court said no. The federal court told the governor of Ohio that the NRC can open this reactor even though they haven't studied the impact of an earthquake on evacuation. I mean,
well, the plant was built knowing that there was an earthquake fault under the intake and discharge water tunnels. That was known. They claimed it was inactive, it wouldn't be a problem. And then there's a known fault line that runs from Lake Erie, right near the plant, all the way down to Akron. There's a lot of activity. There's been many subsequent earthquakes within a 10-mile radius of the plant, in the lake, on the land. It's a seismically active area, and it's just completely being ignored.
Unbelievable. Yes, and there was an earthquake in the 1500s near St. Louis that actually destroyed an indigenous community. It's very well known. It was a very huge impact. Now, Roger, you mentioned that Holtec is doing this work on the fly without permits, and you know, assuming they're going to get permitted. And there's a classic case of this, which is VC Summer, which is you know, Westinghouse, Toshiba, South Carolina Utilities got together to build the 2 reactors at VC Summer without full permitting. And they went along and they went along and they went along. And next thing you know, they spent $9 billion and they can't open the thing. It's just sitting there.
So that's exactly, Harvey, where our petition is about. So the NRC has never approved Holtec's proposal for restart, and yet Holtec continues with significant work, just like what you're talking about at VC Summer. And they're working under the assumption of implicit approval because the NRC has been silent on the key regulatory issues. In other words, the inspectors aren't even on site. So we're alleging that the NRC's inaction could be interpreted as an attempt to allow Holtec to select its own regulatory rules, and allowing Holtec to do so has resulted in Holtec prioritizing less stringent rules that, while technically compliant, do not address the unique risks of returning Palisades to operation. So it's exactly the same point. And we've seen this before in Midland, where they built two twin nuclear power reactors for $4.5 billion, and the soil beneath the plants couldn't support the plant. And they had to throw away $4.5 billion in investment because guess what? They didn't do their groundwork, so to speak. And, the plants weren't stable, they were leaning. And we've talked a little bit about Fermi. I think, Joe, you've done a study in Monroe County, is that right? About the cancer rate there? How does that stack up against the cancer rate in the rest of the state?
It kind of had the same result as the one I did near Palisades. Years ago, before it opened, it was below the county rate of cancer mortality was below the U.S. I forget the numbers, 8%. Now it's 17% higher, and it's got the highest childhood cancer death rate in the state of any county in the state.
And I want you to remind our audience that these numbers are CDC mortality statistics. It's not something that, and yet the government itself has never done this study, correct?
Right. They produce the data, but they never do anything with it.
It's just mind-boggling. And Sherry McWhorter, if you're still with us and you're doing reporting on this, take a look at what happened at VC Summer. Now, everybody's rightfully jumping up and down about the two reactors in Georgia that opened at close to $40 billion, a mere 20 or so billion over budget, which will, of course, happen at Palisades if they proceed. But the real one is the two reactors in South Carolina that they couldn't finish. They spent $9 billion and they walked away. That's what bankrupted Westinghouse, for God's sakes. I mean, it's insane. Connie Klein, did you want to say something further from Cleveland?
I have a question for Roger. Two-part question. I know the petition was recently filed, like in the last 3 months.
That's right.
What if they grant the petition and then develop regulations such that, what if they develop generic regulations that would apply to all of the plants that want to restart? Isn't that a possibility?
I think the NRC is at this point doesn't know what to do, and here's the reason why. In effect, Palisades has been grandfathered in for decades, and Alan Blinn, who was the chief nuclear engineer operating, basically the chief engineer for the plant for 6 years, they were grandfathered in for decades, and they were never required to meet industry standards that are already in effect. So grandfathering in is one thing, but making that the new standard after all the other plants have to comply with the current regulations. So in other words, this plant couldn't be built today, period. VC Summer, which we just talked about, the new reactors in Georgia, they all had to meet, all the NRC standards that don't apply to Palisades. So what we're talking about is, how do you create a new rule book when all the other plants in the country are already operating under different fire code, for example? They don't meet the fire codes for the other plants and so on. So that would be really difficult to roll back the standards for everybody else. As far as restarting other plants, believe it or not, the plants we're talking about, the ones that we're listing, they actually do meet the current NRC standards. So what that means is Palisades is in a unique situation. They were given a pass, basically. And this is why we're filing this petition, because Palisades is uniquely a challenge for the NRC because they can't comply. And we're seeing already they're backing down. Apparently, they're now according to Kevin, floating the idea, well, yeah, we may replace the steam generators, but there's a lot of other problems that the plant faces, and it could cost a lot of money, take a lot of time, and then still it might not meet the NRC requirements. So the question is, why is the government, both federally and state, giving all this money to Palisades when they know it may be a fool's errand? And I think the answer goes something like this, that all the politicians on both sides, and we don't see this very often, but it's kumbaya, here for the nuclear industry, because the Republicans and Democrats all get campaign money across the board, pretty much, from the energy industry. And so they have every reason to be supportive of this in Michigan and nationally. But the reality is that the myth that surrounds this, that somehow this is going to create clean energy. If you read my progressive article, for example, it is not, nuclear power is not clean energy, but that's really the sales pitch that they've been using to get these plants restarted.
Right.
It's not clean compared to wind, not complete solar, et cetera. And of course, it takes much less time to build those plants. So the economic argument fails. They are contributing to global warming, for example. And as Joe has just pointed out, there's a special risk that's not present with wind or solar. And the risk is radiation. And Kevin just talked about the waste dump and the fact that all the waste is sitting in violation really of NRC standards. So there's all these special risks. And then,
Right.
as Joel will point out, the whole fuel cycle, in fact, the plant itself doesn't produce its own power. They're taking a lot of power produced, by traditional plants, not nuclear, to power the plant. Correct, Joe? And then the whole fuel cycle, I mean, Joe can explain it, but basically there's a lot of carbon in making the fuel for these nuclear plants. Correct, Joe? And
Yeah,
Mars,
others are more expert than me than that. But yes, from mining, milling, enrichment,
Right.
fabrication, purification. Yep.
Right.
Transportation.
Well, whenever
Mars-
you hear somebody referring to in an article to a nuclear plant being carbon free, they're on the take. Nuclear power plants are not carbon free. Even in the fission process, they emit carbon-14, which is radioactive. And as you point out, in the fuel cycle, there's tons of radiation of carbon.
And here's the kicker. This is really cool. You won't believe this, but it's true. The SMRs, they don't take the traditional fuel that would go into a plant like Palisades. It's a very special type of fuel. And guess where it comes from? Take a guess. Russia. And of course, they don't have an export license for it. So Bill Gates has a little problem there.
They don't care. It's all a scam. What's infuriating is that the state of Michigan could, if they took the $100 million that they squandered restarting Fermi and put it into wind way back when you and I were still in college, Roger, the state could be entirely wind powered. And we're seeing that now in California, where this liberal Democratic governor, we had a spectacularly successful phase out plan that was labored over by all the best and brightest for 2 years, 2016 to 18. It was signed and sealed and delivered. And then 4 years later, this idiot Gavin Newsom jumps in and kills it, where we have more than enough solar energy in California with backup batteries to power the whole state. And, it's the same is true with wind in Michigan. Did you want to say something, Linda, real quick?
Really quick, Gavin Newsom also completely eviscerated our leading solar program in California this year. He vetoed just last week 6 bills that the legislature had passed to help build up our solar, and now our solar is done. He is a tool of the utility companies.
So the question is, you got Grantham, you got and Whitmer and Newsom, all these guys doing the bidding of the nuclear power industry. They're basically Luddites when it comes to solar. Gavin Newsom could not possibly have done more damage to solar energy in California, an industry that had 70,000 people installing panels. We have over 2 million rooftops in California that have solar, and they're destroying the industry very consciously. So we've started this campaign to solarize LA by the 2028 Olympics, and we're going to get. I'm sure we're going to get a tsunami of resistance, all this stuff about why we can't do this and that. But the bottom line is that we were on the brink in California of going 100% renewable very quickly. And all of a sudden they come in and they are now admitting, PG&E has admitted that to keep Diablo open until 2030 will cost over market almost $12 billion. $12 billion, with which we could very, very easily solarize the entire state. Paul Newman, who actually has rooftop solar in Santa Monica, you want to jump in? Oh, are you muted? Hold on, you're muted. Damn.
There.
There
Okay,
you go.
I'm unmuted now. I understand that Betty Yee is running against Newsom in the primary. So just to let you know, she's running for governor.
I don't think that Newsom's going to run, Paul.
No, Newsom can't run. Newsom's term
good.
limited, thankfully.
Well, I know Betty Yee's running, but the question is, was she involved with Alicia?
Yeah, she stabbed us in the back. Betty Lee was on the Coastal Commission,
Yee.
and she stabbed us, Betty Yee, and she stabbed us in the back. So we're looking, Paul, maybe you should run for governor. We need somebody who's really pro-solar and reliably to do this. But the question now, we're almost out of time. We still have 36 people. You guys are fabulous. The question now is why and how are they consciously killing the solar industry in the United States, especially in California, and pushing nukes? It's astonishing. It's the definition of insanity here. But if we can build a movement, we want to turn Los Angeles into the world's biggest solar collector. We know we can get a very substantial, if not all the electricity LA uses from solar panels installed on the rooftops and the parking lots and the aqueducts in LA County, and which has 10 million people in it, by the way. So, but the governor has stepped in and not only prolonging the operation of Diablo Canyon, which is absolutely insane, but gutting, as Linda said, the solar industry. And the solar energy industry is politically, inert. And so it's, the usual suspects here. As we faced in Ohio, Ohio was on the brink of having the whole North Coast be powered by wind power. I know, I was in there selling windmills to farmers. They all wanted them. And then one sentence in the Ohio Code killed the North Coast wind industry in Ohio. It was we had $4 billion on the table to build wind power in Northern Ohio. And the same is true in Michigan. You go across Michigan with windmills, you can power that state, and they want to blow $8 billion now on Palisades. And what is going on here? Did these guys eat the bad acid? What's going on here? And then Joe comes and tells us these reactors are killing people, which we've known, thanks to him, for years and years. Something weird is happening here, and it's as weird and as frightening and as turning point-ish as the election. And so that's what we need to deal with. Lynn Feinerman, go ahead. We're almost out of time. And Lynn, it'd be good to hear from you.
Thank you. I think that there may be a oligarch attempt to take advantage of anti-wokeness. I think that all of this attempt to renew nuclear is part of the right-wing response to everything that was attempted in terms of progress.
Well, I think in a certain way, the idea of converting to a renewable-based economy is every bit as hard to accept for many, many people as the idea of a woman of color being president of the United States. And so, we'll see how that goes, but I see them as totally parallel. The conversion of renewables, as Carl knows, having been with us for so long, and Roger and Kevin, I mean, we all, and then we know we're no longer talking in any way, shape, or form about anything abstract or futuristic about solar energy. Solar energy is more than proven. And you look at the tens of billions of dollars that are going into renewables all over the world. This is not some, hippie commune. This is big business here. And so now you got these guys like Bill Gates and Elon Musk holding on to small reactors, which are completely nuts. In no way, shape, or form make any economic sense. And they're pushing it. But I think we can win. I don't think we have a choice. Our species is not going to survive more nuclear plants. And if you look at the charts, a lot of state by state and is converting. And of course, Germany with Angela Merkel did make the step to shut all their reactors. But we're at the precise. I see a precise turning point, precisely parallel turning points with putting a woman of color in charge and switching to renewables. I think they're twin factors here in human evolution. So we're almost out of time. Steve, go ahead. Steve, thank you for engineering today. We appreciate it.
Do you see any parallels between the Exxon scandal back in the day under, I guess it was the Bush administration, and this? I mean, it was like everybody was jumping on board that and finally got exposed. But I just don't, I can't believe these people are motivated to do this. There's got to be something crazy whack behind it. They're just ruining their political careers. I mean, you got to just say it. It's just stupid.
Well, they're Luddites, basically. You have the coal, oil, nuke, and gas, King Kong. The nuclear industry is a Siamese twin with both the weapons industry and the fossil fuel industry. They're all of a piece. And they can't kill anybody with solar, although I'm sure they'll find a way somewhere. So this is the transition that we face, and we have no choice but to win. And the good news, I mean, the really good news, and Kevin has been with us long enough, and Roger and Joe, certainly Carl, and is that the numbers and Linda, the numbers are on our side. That's what's really changed. Solar is so much cheaper than nuclear, as is wind. And the battery technology, just in the last 3 or 4 years, has also come on. So we can ride that wave. We've just got to get these guys out of the way.
And can you say that one windmill could be equivalent to a small nuclear plant? I mean, and they're making them bigger and bigger. Not that they should be that big, but
well, the biggest windmills we're getting now are about 20 megawatts, which is, we started with 50 at 50 kilowatts. So we're now up to 20 megawatts per windmill. There's going to be a breaking point over which they can't go.
But the cost to build
only building so big. But
2022, they built 100 or put up 100 windmills, and in no time flat. How much electricity that produces? It's unbelievable.
A lot. They're big. Yeah. They're big. Well, let's put this way. We're almost done here. It's almost 4:20. Time to toke up. But in 1975, we had a Tour Tomorrow Fair, and we talked about renewable energy. And there was a guy there, William Hieronymus, and he proposed, he forecast that General Electric and the other big companies would start building windmills offshore that would be 5 megawatts. Nobody took him seriously. Everybody thought he was completely whacked out. And now the Chinese are building windmills that are close to 20 megawatts. So we have the technology and the numbers on our side. The question is, if we can shut this nonsense at Palisades, get Diablo down, stop 3 Mile Island, Duane Arnold, all these other places, and I think we can. I think we will. So let's just root for this evolutionary change all across the board. All right, anybody else want to jump in? We still have 36 people with us. Fantastic. Joe Mangano, thank you for coming. Roger, Kevin, Linda, Carl, just keep up, please.
And real quick question, Sluggo. Are we going to be around next week for Indigenous Peoples Day, or are we going to take that day off?
Oh, I think we should keep going, because as we close in on the election, I thought that Andrea and Ray, their presentations were incredibly important. We've only got 4 weeks till the election, so I vote to continue. I'm glad you mentioned that. There was a guy, I don't know if you guys saw this, but there was a candidate, a Republican candidate out west, I think Montana, who was confronted by an indigenous activist with some kind of question, and he told her to go back where she came from. How do you top that, you know? And I will point out also that Donald Trump is screaming and yelling at immigrants. His mother was an immigrant.
Yep.
Donald Trump's mother came from England. So maybe he's just acting out. Who knows? But anyway,
Roger, you're joking.
Harvey,
Yes, Myla?
Can I just say it's too bad that our person from Field Team 6 didn't come on, because he's working on voter registration.
All right, we'll get him next week.
Just listen, because next week is going to be too late for this announcement. Today is the very last day to register to vote in a number of states, and those are Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Ohio, Tennessee, and Texas. So if you know anybody in any of those states, please give them a call and make sure that they're registered.
Yes, and I will send everybody, when I get it from Andrea and Ray, a paragraph each on where to go to make phone calls with Andrea and to donate with Ray. And I just want to say, as in closing, that I got my ballot today. And my wife and I got our mail-in ballots in California, and there you go. So
cool. I'll have to go to the post office.
yes, you should. All right, everybody. Thank you again, Steve. Thank you, Mike. Everybody, Roger, thanks for coming on. Linda, this was very, very productive, and it couldn't be better. So I do want to meet, if you don't mind, on Indigenous Peoples Day. TATANKA, maybe we'll bring some folks on from the Indigenous community. Connie, thanks for joining us, and everybody, Ruth, and Sherry McWhirter, I hope you wrote some good stuff for Palisades, and nobody does better reporting than Roger Rapoport. Ask Eugene Powers. That's an in joke. All right, you guys. No nukes, everybody. We'll see you next week.